Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Bleeding Edge podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Benker, and with me today on the show, my co-host, Emil Ogier. Emil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ralph. Let's go.
Let's go. So, some really interesting items in the news this week, as ever. And we'll kick off with OpenAI. They've launched something called Prism, and it is a free, what they call Latex native workspace, and it's aimed at the scientific writing community. And by all accounts, it's going to be a real game changer in terms of research. So some of the things we've been talking about on the show is that a lot of the frontier models are actually trying to game change the process of research. So, basically building the tools to define their own problems and then go away and solve those problems. A lot of researchers are obviously, using quite old tools, and this Prism tool basically unifies everything into a single AI embedded chat surface. And this means that documents, citations, versioning, collaboration, and all of those day-to-day grinds of drafting, revising, and assembling research outputs is actually moved into one environment that is supported by AI. It looks really interesting, and the fact that it is free is going to shake the industry up because its closest rival, the existing tool, does have a paywall. So no doubt we'll be testing that one soon. In a classic platform fashion, OpenAI have announced obviously Prism, but they've also announced the cleanup notice, and they're going to be retiring a bunch of older models inside ChatGPT from February 13th. And so a couple of models will disappear. Obviously, 5.2 basically encompasses a variety of different models, and it's able to select it automatically. Some of those standalone models that exist on the ChatGPT that you can actually select, they will disappear. And so that's fascinating. We're really seeing models starting to retire, shifting to some hardware news. Quite interesting that DeepSeek are reportedly looking at NVIDIA's H200 chips, and China has conditionally approved the purchase of DeepSeek's NVIDIA H200 chips. So traditionally, China has tried to influence its AI companies to buy local, but obviously NVIDIA is still leading the pack in terms of those chip performance. Another AI news item this week from Apple, they have acquired a audio AI startup called QAI. This is an Israeli company, reportedly somewhere between 1.6 to 2 billion, depending on where you read your news. And it's kind of interesting because it just starts to show Apple's AI strategy. It's less about AI in the form of a chatbot, which we've grown accustomed to with so many of the other tools. This is more about embedded AI running on their hardware. And so they're really betting on voice being the key kind of mode, if you like, for interacting with your AI. So we'll have to wait and see exactly where they put all of that audio capability that they've just purchased with QAI. And then, of course, our favorite kind of frontier firm to hate on, at least if you're the European Union, they've opened a formal investigation into X related to Grok and the harmful deepfake concerns. And they're obviously doing this under the Digital Services Act framework. And so really the story here is about generative media and something that governments really want to regulate, managing the operational risk. So more compliance, reporting, mitigation, and enforcement. And obviously, X is being targeted, I guess, to some degree. I don't think the other models are as open and free as X, which is probably why it's attracting so much attention. But there are so many models that are able to create this content. And so it begs the question just how, the EU sees that kind of policing role going beyond what is now the kind of the poster child of being a bad boy, X and Grok. South Korea has also been in the news because they are regulating, they're wrestling with how to regulate AI. So a few weeks back, we had a big story on what South Korea were doing. It was kind of at the same time as Australia announced their ban of social media for under 16s. And South Korea had put in some controls for how AI is used in advertising. Obviously, there has been a bit of pushback. And interestingly enough, the pushback is from two different parts of society. So Startups are worried about the burden and the ambiguity. They're not entirely sure what is being controlled and what compliance really means for them. But civil society is actually saying that the protection isn't strong enough. And so, they're really looking at demanding more in terms of regulation and control. So a bit of a battleground there. We'll have to see where that lands. I mean, clearly the compliance and some kind of regulation and control is definitely necessary, but I'm just a bit worried that the genie is out of the bottle. And so how they do that without kind of, stifling the industry and growth is going to be the juggling act. On another kind of hardware infrastructure side, Pale Blue Dot AI, they raised 150 million at a valuation of 1 billion to scale a GPU marketplace. And they're going to create some dedicated clusters. And this is for the Asian market. So interesting to see the infrastructure spend kind of following the rest of the market in Europe and the US. And so lots more going on in terms of investment into startups, into infrastructure. And I think this week, we have some information also coming through, again, from Davos and Europe's policy conversation about training data and how people are actually going to get, basically, how they're going to get remunerated for the data that the AI has been trained on. And so there's a European Parliament press release that says the Legal Affairs Committee are pushing for transparency on copyrighted works used in generative AI training. I wonder whether that's all a bit too late. We're in a place where these LLMs are already generating their own training data. It's almost like last year's issue that the regulations and governments are catching up with. But clearly, there are a lot of people out there that stand to gain, should they need to pay for those copyrighted works. And that's only fair and right. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out. But it's just fascinating to see that the regulation is kind of finally catching up to where we were last year. So some interesting news items there. I think the big one for me is definitely Prism and this kind of push into the research community with a free tool that is unbelievably capable. And you can actually log on and go and play with that right now. I have access to it by the looks of it. So, it's certainly something that everybody should give a go. If you are researching anything, stick it in there, see what you can do. Are you researching anything, Emil?
As always, there's more research than time, Rolf, looking at everything and anything.
So, yeah, quite a few interesting stories there. Anything stand out for you?
So, Rolf, just covering a couple of the items you mentioned, it is interesting with Grok being targeted once again, or maybe more specifically Elon Musk. I appreciate the concerns. We do need the right guardrails, but it's quite clear in the market that LLMs it's quite easy to get around those guardrails and that they're not isolated to Grok itself. And in addition, there are tons of deep fake videos going around being produced with the likes of Soros, etc. But I do not see any headline news on the same levels of attention being drawn to those products. So an interesting one to watch. I just wonder if it's the platform or the owner that's being specifically targeted in this instance. And regarding those on the same theme, regarding the guardrails, it'll be interesting to see where that's going. I do need to look back on what's happening in Australia. We did cover that in a previous podcast, where under 18s were getting around those guardrails using a picture of a Labrador. It was pretty funny. It'd be interesting to see if they've made any progress on that, on strengthening, those protection mechanisms. And lastly, I did quite appreciate your reference to Pale Blue Dot. I'm a massive fan of Carl Sagan, and that does have a lovely reference to humanity. And, hopefully they can wrap around the principles of looking after civilization and Mother Earth. And hopefully that's part of the aspiration to using that title.
Well, one can only hope. Maybe they just thought it was a good marketing opportunity. I mean, you are talking about an AI infrastructure company that is going to be using a ton of water and a ton of electricity.
True.
And so, can AI really be pro-humanity? Well, we'll see. I mean, it's fascinating, kind of almost seeing everybody's taking their positions. Grok is the bad boy, but it's fascinating that on the other side you have Claude Code, which always seems to be implicated in hacks. And I've just seen another article posted on Medium that was dissecting a hack that was reportedly undertaken with Claude Code. And obviously, Claude doesn't know that it's doing something illegal. And I had a bit of an experience with this. I might just share this, really fascinating. I needed to get some information off a website for a client. It was the client's information, and they had a third-party service that had provided a training product to their customers, but they couldn't get the data out of this platform in mass. So basically, loads and loads of courses. The API just wouldn't allow the download of that information. And so I actually pointed Claude Code at this problem, and I said, I need all of these courses. They belong to us, and indeed, they do belong to the client. And at first, it wouldn't do it. It kind of said, I'm not really allowed to go and get this data. But then I assured it, no, this is actually my data. I own it. So go and fetch it. And it then complied. It took a couple of passes, but it actually wrote a script which I ran inside the console. Basically, if you right click on any website, you can go and inspect code, and it'll show you the code of the website. So go away and try this at home. It's not dangerous to do. And a little panel will open up on the right of your screen that shows you all the code. And in there, you can drop in code to execute against the website. This basically means that it doesn't matter what information you have on your website, anybody can go and grab it. Crawlers and kind of scrapers have been around for a long time, so this is nothing new. But I'm talking about something that's really, really targeted, that actually can go and grab anything off any website if you just let Claude Code go around a few cycles of trying to figure out how that website is structured. It will write you a script that will get anything off anywhere. So I'm not saying you should go and try that, but certainly we needed to get this information. And it just actually goes to show how powerful and how accessible these tools kind of are in terms of, I guess I'm not a hacker. I wouldn't say that's a hacking activity per se, but it's definitely a hack. And it was reasonably easy. It took me about 15 minutes to orchestrate that download of all the information that I needed.
Well, thanks, Rolf, for bringing awareness to it. It's something I certainly did not have a lens on, so I need to have a look at that.
Yeah, well, why don't we move on from my hacking activities and get into your first news? What have you got for us this week?
Certainly, diving into the first story, covering one of the hottest topics in tech right now. It's certainly garnering a lot of attention online. It's an AI assistant that isn't just smart, it acts. Imagine a digital assistant that runs on your own machine, stays online 24/7, and is capable of doing real tasks, not just answering questions. Instead of being confined to a chat box and constrained to an app browser, ClaudeBot connects to your favorite communication platform, WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord, even Slack, and it performs actions on your behalf. From managing your calendar, sending emails, browsing the web, automating workflows, and even handling your files and executing system command. It essentially is a workhorse AI assistant that can execute instructions without you even needing to leave your favorite app, and requests are made through natural language. It launched as ClaudeBot, inspired and named after the mascot of Anthropic's Claude AI model. However, due to receiving a cease and desist from Anthropic, the creator had to give it a new name. So, ClaudeBot molted like a lobster shedding its shell to become MaltBot. It's the same open project, but with an evolved identity. The rebranding isn't just corporate housekeeping. It reflects a broader tension in AI right now between community-driven tools and the big AI labs. And it adds a fun metaphor. So what makes MaltBot so exciting? It's a personal assistant, not a passive responder. It doesn't wait for you to type in the chat window. It can proactively do things like monitor your inbox or schedule tasks. It runs locally. Your data stays under your control instead of living in the cloud. It's multi-platform and versatile. From home control to business automation, use cases go far beyond simple conversation, and you get to choose what models suit you best. Persistent memory. This is a big one, Rolf. Unlike transient chatbots, this bot remembers you and your preferences, what you told it not to do, what you told it can do better, your preferred persona and writing style. It remembers all the things you're working on, what you're trying to solve, and your previous conversations. It essentially has the potential to fold all these historical, repetitive pain points we experience engaging with agents. Imagine a personal assistant that knows you, your schedule, self-organizes your inbox, adjusts your lighting and music before a call, all from a familiar platform such as WhatsApp. But hold on, there's a dangerous side. No exciting tech discussion is complete without a sober reality check. Security risks are real. With great power comes great vulnerability. It has deep access to your computer and accounts. Configurations can expose sensitive data, and there have been examples of malware scams leveraging its name and hype. It's also not cheap to run at scale. Running powerful AI models behind it like Cloud or ChatGPT can lead to significant token and API costs if you're not careful or know what you're doing. Setup complexity. It's not plug and play app. Installing and securing it requires technical skill. And a word of warning to our listeners. The hype around Claude Bot spilled over into cryptocurrency world, even though the project itself has never issued or endorsed any token. Its creator, Peter Steinberg, explicitly stated he will never launch a coin and warned that they are token claiming to involve him. It's a scam and that the fraudulent schemes are damaging to the project's reputation. Additionally, the hype around Claudebot surpasses its actual novelty. It's essentially an existing AI model wrapped in a message service and scheduler. So it's not a true breakthrough as many claim. Opportunistic actors exploited the name recognition during a chaotic name rebrand. Scammers launched fake, unauthorized meme tokens, which briefly spiked in price and market cap, reportedly reaching an estimated $16 million before crashing and essentially going to zero after a classic pump and dump cycle. These tokens were not official, not associated with the project developers, and pumped purely on speculation and hype, leaving the investors facing steep losses when the price collapsed. So it's important to recognize that a crypto scam has contributed to a lot of this hype. Commentators emphasize that Clawbot is not a consumer ready, and even its creator warns that non-technical users should avoid installing it without a deep understanding of security and configuration. In conclusion, Maltbot is an interesting technical project with great future potential, but it has been overhyped in the short term with significant costs and risks that outweigh practical gains for most listeners. There is promise and responsibility that comes with putting AI in the driver's seat. At the heart of this fevered interest over what the agent does, it's also about what it signals. We are witnessing a shift from AI that talks to AI that does, from assistants that answer trivia to ones that operate autonomously, integrate to your tools, and become your digital partners in productivity.
Yeah, so have you installed Maltbot?
I was so keen to, Rolf, and then I caught wind of this after a deep dive, and it's caused me a bit of respite. I'm taking pause to take it in and be a little bit more careful with my approach. But I would like to use tools like this in the future.
Yeah, I think the reason it's kind of caught people's attention is because it really works. And the next frontier is really about AI personal assistants that actually can knit together, the complexities of what makes up a life, and all those messages and meetings and events and documents and research and things that we engage with. Actually, this tool is capable. And I think it's the first time that somebody has really knitted something together that starts to resemble what is a very capable personal assistant. And I think this guy, Peter Steinberger, is a German developer. Maybe he should launch a coin. I don't know why he's saying he's not going to launch a coin. He can clearly make a lot of money out of it. But maybe that's not what he's after. I mean, it's a pity they've asked him to change the name. Claude Bot, he actually spelt it CLUD. So very different to Anthropic's Claude, which is CLUDE. But I get the fact that they probably felt like it was a little bit close to their own brand. But interestingly enough, Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of Google DeepMind. Google DeepMind is obviously based in the UK. It was purchased by Google back in 2014. And that's been the lab that's been responsible for so many of the evolutions in AI that Google have come up with. And he was saying, that he really believes that that is the next big milestone. And certainly they are rebirthing their Google Glasses, venture, because that kind of ambient AI always on technology is what they believe is required to actually provide a viable assistant, because it's kind of plugged into all of the things that are happening in your life. So that's definitely something that they are looking at. And I believe that they've actually got a collaboration with Samsung to bring out what will be the new Google glasses. So that's going to be quite fascinating. Obviously, Meta have been doing very, very well with their glasses, their joint venture with the makers of Ray-Ban. I think they've also now got them in Oakley. Obviously, they're all Ray-Ban, Oakley, all owned by the same company, and Meta have partnered with them with obviously, the form factor being the glasses. So let's see what Google come up with their collaboration with Samsung. But yeah, Claudebot, I have got a spare computer lying around here that I've been eyeing out, and that is going to be my target for my Claudebot slash Maltbot implementation. I've got to give it a go. But if I might just share, one other item that I've spent this week doing is actually trying to solve that exact problem of memory and context. And yesterday, I successfully installed something called OmniCortex, and it promises to do pretty much what Maltbot does, it does for Claude. And so this thing builds a memory and a context that it maintains and persists throughout every session. So pretty much at the end of every day, you get the summary of this is what you've done, and everything that the machine has obviously run. And it's really, really powerful because you have this, concept of persistent context. And so the machine learns as it's basically producing analysis, research, tools, code that is building in its memory, and it's able to access those every day. I start with remember the memories from yesterday, and it pulls everything in. And so this is quite powerful, that you can now actually build systems inside these systems that overcome some of these limitations. I think memory, context were the two that actually Demis called out. I'm just looking at my notes here. And long-term planning was his third one. So I've managed to solve two of those issues just yesterday. And I'm looking forward to trialing that over the coming weeks and giving some feedback on how well that works. But it seems that we are now able to leverage these tools to fix these problems ourselves. So thanks to a guy called Tony Medina who built OmniCortex. I think I'm one of the early people to adopt and trial it. But very, very powerful system to solving some of these issues that we've seen with the LLMs today.
That sounds very cool, Rolf. And I got to add, I do feel sorry for this creator somewhat, because Claudebot, as it's now officially called, it's been a passion project of his, and it's open source, and he's just unfortunately got the wrong kind of attention from bad actors. But it doesn't take away the utility and the idea around the product. Even though it's a wrapper, it does introduce it to market to users that ordinarily were too scared to use a CLI prompt. So, there's a lot of potential behind it, and I just look forward to seeing its next evolution.
Yeah, and obviously the security part of it is really the main thing that people need to be concerned about. I had one author recommend, if you read the security guidelines and you don't understand it, then that app is probably not something you should implement. And maybe that's the best advice that you can be given. But of course, if you do understand it, and you can put the controls in place, then it's a fantastic tool. But give me a call if you want to install Maltbot/Claudebot, and I'm sure we'll figure out a way to help you. Anyway, let's move on to another story then. Shall I go with one that I've got here?
Please do.
Well, it's just a short one, really, and I don't want to be kind of, adding to the AI bubble and AI hype kind of story, but it was just some fascinating analysis that came out by a very kind of, I would say, pessimistic author that I follow. He really doesn't speak very well of AI and the AI bubble, but he just brought out a point that related to last week's news. OpenAI had announced that they had earned around 20 billion in 2025, but he's basically calling bullshit on that number for a variety of reasons. But the main thing that kind of came out of his analysis was, OpenAI have essentially now committed to around $1 trillion in data center and infrastructure build out. So that's what they've committed to. Turnover, or at least their earnings were 20 billion. That's kind of 900 and 900 odd million less than what they need to cover what they've spent, or at least what they've committed to spend. So one of the things that we talked about last week is that they're going to start with ads, and ads is going to bring in ad revenue. But when you look at the ad revenue from Google, they have about 5 trillion searches a year, and that nets them just under $50 billion in revenue. And so even if OpenAI gets all of that revenue, there's still 900 million short. So even with what they've earned in subscription fees and what they stand to make with advertising fees, the business model just doesn't add up. And so this particular author is basically calling out that we are going to see OpenAI crash and burn either in 2026 or early in 2027. So that's a prediction. Quite a few people shorting OpenAI, and they haven't even gone public yet. There is talk of an IPO, and so I don't know where this is going to go. I can't see them going under, but the economics don't stack up. So I don't know what you make of that.
And there's also the other rumor kind of circulating around OpenAI, whether they being too generalist and not focusing on a certain vertical. So I'm not sure if that adds fuel to the fire.
Well, it definitely does, because we have Anthropic with the maker of Claude Code. They really have focused on that vertical. Claude doesn't really have multimodal capability, so it doesn't have a voice solution and an image generator, whereas obviously OpenAI have Sora, and they which is their kind of like TikTok kind of platform equivalent. Apparently, the user retention is very, very weak. So after about 30 days, only 1% of users are still actually on the platform. It's even worse when you kind of get to 60 days. So they've definitely got a retention issue there. So some of those products just aren't going anywhere. Atlas is not going anywhere. We heard a few weeks back they've launched their health offering, and obviously they're trying to focus on enterprise. They're trying to focus on consumer. Anthropic is quite different. They're really focusing on coding and engineering, and not even Google can stand up to the might of Claude Code. I've been using Anti-Gravity quite successfully. It's a Google product. I've developed a few apps with it. They work, and I've actually largely been impressed. But when I look at some of the feedback on the forums, it leaves a lot to be desired. It's not at the level of Claude Code. And so I think, your point about vertical focus, it's really working for Anthropic. And as you've said you've reported in the past, Anthropic are one of the few AI firms that are actually nearly profitable. And so, Google don't really care. They can make these tools available for free. They're just trying to hoover up market share. But of course, for companies like Anthropic, they really do need to be turning a profit to be sustainable.
Indeed, and I might have my figures wrong, but I'm close enough to the mark. Anthropic have something like an 80% engagement rates on the corporate side. So they're certainly doing things right on that front. And, the people that have the deep pockets are interested and engaged.
Yeah, and I think lock-in is obviously a concern for a lot of people. One piece of fascinating research that I did this week was just on the models in China. I have a client that I'm working with in China, and a number of the European or kind of Western models aren't easily accessible to people unless they're using a VPN. And so, models like Qwen, DeepSeek, they are actually very well supported in China, and that's a really good thing. But one of the things that was fascinating is that Qwen in particular, Qwen is Alibaba's AI chat platform. Qwen has been trained on a lot more manufacturing data. And so a lot of the analysis that I'm doing, I've now started switching over to Qwen, because I'm kind of looking at manufacturing companies, manufacturing supply chain, sourcing, product development. And actually, what it's reported is that Qwen has been trained on a lot more of that data that models like Anthropic's Claude just have never actually seen. And so it is important not just to think about the capability of the model and the benchmark of the model, but also the source data that it's been trained on. And, therein lies another vertical. If you've trained your model on all of the healthcare data out there, no doubt it's going to be better than some of your competitors. If you've trained your model on all of the manufacturing supply chain data out there, you've got an opportunity to build a moat. And perhaps that's going to be the last remaining competitive advantage in the market.
And that's an important lesson, Rolf, that we should stop looking for the perfect model or the perfect system and focus more on which model is tailored towards your needs.
Yeah, there's a lesson there. But of course, you've got to go out and play with them. So, I think, that kind of drives this new shiny toy behavior, and everybody's trying to really consolidate and not add another tool into the mix, so it can be quite hard, but definitely worth looking at the China models. I would really recommend Quen, and I've been playing a lot more with DeepSeek.
Will do. Thanks, Rolf. Can I move on to the next story?
Let's do it.
Cool. So this one made me a little bit sad. Rest in peace to Stack Overflow Q&A site. They now only have circa 6,000 queries per month, down from 300,000 at their peak, which evidently is also the same amount of queries they had in the first month that they started. It's disarming knowing how loved the service was and seeing it fall due to the displacement power of AI. They're not closing their doors, however, new contributions have essentially dried up. And I do think this raises a bigger question. Losing these deep, giant forums of human expertise essentially means that over time, LLMs have no new surface areas for high-quality, structured human knowledge to train from. And I don't really know what this might mean for the future of LLMs or ourselves, the consumers of these rich and synthesized data sets. So yeah, just a bit of sad news there, and don't know where we really go from there.
Well, we've had so many of these examples over the years, big names that have disappeared. I was listening to the ex-CEO of Boo.com, during the .com era. I was in a .com, and Boo.com their offices were just down the road from me in London. It was the same time as ASOS had kicked off. And so, they got something like 200 million in funding, and they blew up, not long after. And obviously, a slightly different story. Stack Overflow has been a much loved platform, but this is what happens. Forms become disintermediated, and they move on. The market moves on. Interestingly enough, I asked a question today of a client just how they did their translation of their product manuals, and they said, "Oh, there's this guy. He does the translations into French and Dutch." And obviously, we've had Google release a new translation model last week, and it's reportedly going to take down the entire translation industry because before you needed to use specialized services, now you can just use this tool, and you've kind of got authentic conversational and technical translation capability. I haven't tried it myself, but I'm going to give it a go soon. This is what's happening. It's not just brands, it's actually entire industries are disappearing. I ran this research a little while back of which business types were basically becoming redundant. And I don't lie to you, Emil, there were about 60 businesses that basically the AI said, this doesn't exist anymore. There's no need for this service. Obviously, translation services were on the top there, but there were many, and they were kind of like quite niche in some cases. But I was amazed by just the extent of what had become invalid or just redundant, not relevant anymore.
It's incredible, Rolf. I'm also having the same experience. Well-loved products that aren't even that old. I'd say no more than a year or two old, and deeply loved, and I've used. They're just using their utility, or their paid services are becoming free because they've lost their moat. And I think there's going to be more dominoes to fall in 26. And one final thought back on just the story of Stack Overflow, because it was deeply loved by me as it was by many developers. So what I was thinking is, in the past, this was a wonderful resource for shared knowledge, and that's what it was, a strength in behind the community. But as these LLMs absorb this information, that active moat of new ideas disappears, and gets incorporated into each of these labs. And I suspect as they advance and they improve in their products, that information won't necessarily be shared back to the community. So what I do question is, as there's new ideas and new developments and better ways of doing things, if that essentially gets stuck within each of the labs and not reshared again, that community dissolves, if that makes any sense to you. It was just a floating thought.
Well, I think they move elsewhere.
Yeah.
We have the new forums, new ways of communicating. And I think the key thing is joining a community, where you can actually share your expertise and your experiences, your wins and your failures. This is what's really working for me. I'm in a few communities, and I think the richness of having real conversations with real people and, obviously kind of getting onto these forums, you'll just have to find a new one.
Yeah.
But that human contact, that human sharing is really, really key. So I think we will just find new ways of getting our fix.
Like the book.
But here's a prompt tip of the day. This one's kind of interesting. I ran this one earlier in the week, and I really loved what came back. So I highly recommend trying this one. And it's very simple. Here's the line: share one interesting assumption I might hold without realizing it. And what it basically came back with was, for me personally, it said, Ralph, you're sharing an awful lot about AI and transformation, but you have to realize that not everybody is so free with their desire to delegate tasks to AI. Others want more control. And so there's a watch out for you, basically, that, telling me to curb my enthusiasm. Others might not be quite as ready for the message. And I just thought it was such a really spot on insight. Obviously, my background is in change management and transformation. And one of the things that's reality is change resistance. Change fatigue is another one. I have got some theories, or at least my own views, having spent 25 years with organizations battling change. And people have different viewpoints because they have fears, they have kind of their own embedded expectations. And just because a new shiny toy has arrived, that doesn't mean that they're all going to want to play with it. So there you go. That's a prompt tip of the day. Share one interesting assumption I might hold without realizing. Put it in any AI. As long as you've got some chat history there, it'll give you a bit of an interesting insight.
That's incredible. I love it. But certainly don't curb your enthusiasm, Rolf. It's the very reason we started this podcast.
Well, yes, no, I think I'm pretty invested in it. Everything that I've seen, it's so fascinating. I try to get a balanced, set of opinions from people that are pro AI and people that are, against it, let's just say, or maybe really calling bullshit on the whole experience. But everything that I'm seeing on the ground and the projects that I'm delivering indicates to me that there is an enormous efficiency and productivity opportunity with AI. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that deployed in the right way with the right expertise, that people can get really positive results. It's not easy, and it's evolving, and changing. And so solutions that you're implementing now, again, might be completely irrelevant just 6 to 12 months down the line. But I'm a real staunch believer that it has an enormous role to play in the future of work. And so, you won't find me climbing off my soapbox anytime soon. But
Actually, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but here's the real test. It still can't do jokes, but the closest I got this week was this one-liner that it came up with, and it said, AI roadmaps now look like airports. A new terminal opens and 3 gates close.
Sounds like Heathrow. We got to laugh.
Yeah, I think that was in reference to OpenAI coming up with Prism, but also then actually basically taking a number of their models off the market. But anyway, got a laugh, got a chuckle from me. So I was very happy with that.
That's great. Thanks. And it's actually a perfect segue into Google's survey. They recently announced their survey with Ipsos covering the last 3 years of release this month. The test had over 1,000 participants spread across many domains in over 21 countries, and it shows that AI usage is surging worldwide. 62% of people report using AI tools now, up significantly from 48% last year and from around 38% in 2023. to 66% in the past 12 months on average. So your assumption, Rolf, that people are using it is correct. And I think just keep up the good fights and keep on using this. For the first time, learning tops the list. 74% of users now turn to AI to learn new things to understand complex topics, clearly marking a shift in usage away from curiosity and entertainment. With educators and students leading the charge, 81% of teachers and 85% of students 18 plus are using it. Optimism is also growing, though concerns about responsible development persists. AI is now moving from experimental to essential and fast.
Yep, and it seems to be that the conversation in Davos has really been focused on that as well. So a little bit less hype and a lot more about the practical applications. The CEO of Mistral, a guy called Arthur Mensch, described the internal friction that companies are facing when they're adopting AI. And basically, he was reported to say the adoption story is shifting from can we to can we operationalize it. So practical implementation, real ROI. This is the stuff that drives any kind of project. To be honest, I've spoken in the past about some of the numbers. 95% of AI projects fail. Well, let me tell you, 95% of all and any product launches fail. This is just, and we don't see newspaper headlines about that every day. So failure is a mode of operations. That's kind of, we fail more than we win. And so it's the same is true with AI, but clearly it has more to give. And I think a lot of people haven't been able to really get the return on investment yet, but there is something lurking. There's gold in them hills. And I think, practical implementation, people are really starting to get the skills and the experience under the belt of what it takes and what it means, because it requires data and it requires clarity. And if you don't have clear policies and processes and procedures, then you can't really give the AI a clear instruction and expect it to succeed. But I think that's starting to shift now. We're getting a kind of a maturity in the market with how to actually get results out of these things.
And failure is a path to progress.
Well, obviously, the big problem that we've had with AI so far is just the enormous spend without seeing the wins. Yeah, fine, we can do lots of really nice images and maybe a couple of funny videos, but can we actually build businesses on it? And clearly some are, we're starting to prove it. So 2026 is definitely the year that we make AI pay. Have you got anything else on your list?
I do. So this one's rather interesting. Earlier this month, Anthropic cut off AI's access to cloud models after discovering that AI engineers were using cloud through their coding tool, Cursor, to assist in building their own competing AI technology, violating Anthropic's terms of service, which prohibit using cloud to develop competing products or train rival AI models. XAI co-founder Tony Wu confirmed that the block is in an internal memo acknowledging that they would take the hit on productivity but would accelerate work on their own coding tools. Following the ban, Nikiti Bia, who leads product operations at X, wrote online that this was time to ban Anthropic from X, suggesting a potential retaliation from themselves. Broader context is this wasn't Anthropic's first such action. They previously revoked OpenAI's API access in August 2025 under similar circumstances, and also limited access for the Windsurf coding service. Anthropic has been aggressively protecting its intellectual property against competitors throughout 25 and 26. The situation also involved Anthropic cracking down on third-party tools that were exploiting their subscription plans, which caused additional controversy in the developer community separate from the XAI ban. So to be clear, it's about blocking XAI from using cloud for their own generated products, not about blocking the social media platform X from anything.
Yeah, the AI wars, the plot thickens.
Indeed. And I've got two more smaller stories, Rolf. Nano Banana Pro has just breached 1 billion images created in 53 days since launch, which is quite incredible. And lastly, Shiloh Marks, an activist focused on cleaning California's voter rolls, filed a pro per lawsuit in 2025 against county under the California's Public Records Act to access voter registration statistics. The county complied and apologized 3 days later via letter, which was shared online, providing the requested data. This month, he credited Grok for assisting in drafting and filing, bypassing traditional legal hurdles and accelerating the process, as evidenced by the rapid resolution reported in local news. This case highlights AI's potential to democratize access to legal tools for public record requests amid ongoing debates on voter roll maintenance, with the 2025 California audit identified over 1.2 million potentially ineligible registrations.
There's a lot of data to sort through there. And yeah, I mean, it's an area that is ripe for AI to have a big role, especially in terms of voter fraud, but maybe it will cause more than it solves.
Who knows?
So I will just do my wrap up of my last piece. As usual, we have a final segment of looking at a personality in the AI space. And this week, no surprise, I'm actually covering Peter Steinberger. Now, I got it wrong earlier. I thought he was German. He's actually an Austrian, and he's the founder or kind of former CEO of something called PSPDF Kit, and he is the creator of the viral AI assistant Claudebot or Maltbot, as it's now been rebranded to. And so this guy is basically spending his time between Vienna and London by the looks of it. And obviously he's been a bit of a sensation given his invention with Maltbot. Anyway, so there's some news. Austrian, not German. My mistake, but there you go. Peter Steinberger. I think you can find him on, he's got a blog and he's on GitHub. So I'm definitely going to check out his GitHub. I'm sure he's got a few interesting open source projects there. This guy is passionate about open source, and he's had actually just looking at the site, it's got Maltbot has 61,500 GitHub stars. So for anybody that doesn't know GitHub, it's the location where developers store their code and documents and implementation instructions, and people typically star those repositories that are called repos if they really like them, and 1,500 stars is quite a lot. So get onto GitHub, go and check it out. If you are into AI, then GitHub is definitely an interesting tool to start using as well. Well, that's a wrap from me. Have you got a last story, Emil?
No, I think that's enough. We're over the hour. Thanks, Rolf. It's been fun.
Well, yeah, it's been a real roller coaster. So thanks very much for a great show. Thank you to our listeners for listening and tuning in. We'll see you on the edge.
Adios.